They'll never say it. Not because they don't know what they want, but because saying it out loud would make it real. And real is terrifying for someone who's spent their life trying to stay safe from it. Avoidant individuals carry a quiet ache. It's the kind of longing that doesn't shout or demand attention. It hides behind calm faces, busy schedules, and words like, "I'm fine." They don't chase love. They don't beg to be seen. But underneath that emotional independence lies an unspoken truth. They want connection just as deeply as anyone else. They just want it without the fear of losing themselves in it. What an avoidant truly wants is simple, but not easy. They want someone who can stay, not by pushing through their walls, but by not reacting to them. Someone who doesn't demand explanations every time they retreat into silence, but who also doesn't disappear in response to it. They want presence, not pressure. Closeness that feels like freedom, not control. You see, avoidance grew up believing that love and safety can't coexist. Somewhere along the way, connection became synonymous with suffocation. So they learned to find safety in distance, in control, in solitude, in keeping emotions neat and contained. But beneath that armor is a deep craving for someone who won't mistake their quiet for indifference. Someone who sees the hesitation and understands it's not a lack of care, it's fear disguised as calm. They want someone emotionally grounded, someone who won't take their space personally, who doesn't interpret their need for solitude as rejection, but as a pause, a recalibration. Someone who can love them softly, without trying to fix them. Because what they fear most isn't love, it's being swallowed by it. And if you look closely, you'll notice something rare. When they finally feel safe, when they sense they won't be consumed or controlled, they start to open up. Not with grand gestures, but with quiet consistency. A text they didn't need to send. A story they've never told. A look that lingers longer than it should. That's what an avoidant really wants. Not to be chased, not to be decoded, but to be understood silently. If you want to better understand how to deal with avoidance, then subscribe to the channel to know everything. Avoidants live in contradiction. They crave closeness the way lungs crave air, but only from a distance. The moment someone steps too close, something inside them panics. Their chest tightens, their mind starts scanning for exits, and a subtle emotional withdrawal begins. To most people, it looks like coldness. But in truth, it's self-preservation. It's not that they don't care. It's that they've learned love can become dangerous when it demands too much. Every avoidant carries an internal compass that points towards safety, not intimacy. Safety, to them, means control of their emotions, their environment, and most importantly, their vulnerability. They want to love without surrendering that control, to connect without losing autonomy. This creates a silent battle within them, freedom versus closeness. Each time someone reaches in, they pull back just far enough to breathe. And yet, the moment they're alone, they start to ache for the warmth they just pushed away. What they really want, but rarely admit, is balance. The kind of connection that doesn't trap them, but also doesn't vanish when they retreat. They long for someone who understands that their silence isn't punishment, it's protection. Someone who knows that when they disappear, it's not about rejection, it's about regulation. They're trying to calm the fear that tells them love equals loss. For avoidance, relationships are full of small negotiations with fear. Every "I miss you" feels like a risk. Every confession of need sounds like a threat to their independence. But underneath it all, they want exactly what everyone else does: to be loved, but safely. To be known, but gently. If you ask them directly, they'll shrug it off. They'll say they're not ready, that they're better alone, that they don't need much from anyone. But their actions will betray them. The way they listen intently when you speak. The quiet protectiveness in how they check in after days of silence. The subtle longing in their eyes when they think you're not looking. They want love that doesn't demand explanation. They want freedom that doesn't require loneliness. And they want someone who can stand in both truths with them, without flinching. Every avoidance distance hides a story. You can feel it in the pauses between their words, in the careful way they control how much of themselves they reveal. They don't just avoid people. They avoid the feeling of needing anyone at all, because somewhere in their past, needing someone meant getting hurt. Depending on someone meant being disappointed, misunderstood, or left behind. So they built walls not out of arrogance, but out of survival. To an outsider, their distance can feel cold or rejecting. But in reality, it's fear, disguised as composure. Avoidants fear the weight of emotional expectations. They fear being responsible for someone else's feelings. They fear becoming trapped in a dynamic they can't control. Most of all, they fear the possibility that if they show their real self, the one with softness and need, it won't be enough to keep someone around. What they'll never say out loud is how exhausting this fear really is. How it drains them to keep pretending they don't care when they do. How they replay conversations, noticing every moment they might have seemed too open, too honest, too vulnerable. How even when they pull away, part of them is silently hoping the other person won't give up. Avoidants want connection, but they want it on safe terms. They need reassurance that closeness doesn't have to mean loss of self. That being loved won't demand they abandon their autonomy. When they find someone who gives them that, someone who can sit in the silence without resentment, something begins to shift. The fear doesn't vanish, but it softens. They start testing the waters. Maybe they share a small detail about their past. Maybe they let you in just a little deeper than before. These moments, though subtle, are monumental for them. Every time they risk showing more, they're defying years of conditioning. They're saying, maybe this time it's different. Maybe this time I can stay. What an avoidant really wants isn't just love, it's safety within love. The assurance that they can be close without being consumed. That their quiet, guarded ways won't make them unworthy of connection. They don't want to be chased, they want to be understood. And when someone understands them, not with pressure but with patience, they finally start to believe that love might not have to hurt. Avoidants rarely say what they mean, not because they're deceitful, but because direct expression feels unsafe. Their language isn't verbal, it's behavioral. Silence, withdrawal, hesitation, these are their dialects of fear and longing. They express themselves through what they withhold, not what they share. It's how they stay protected while still reaching out, quietly, hoping someone will notice the spaces between the words. When an avoidant pulls away, it's not always a sign they've lost interest. Sometimes it's a sign they've begun to care too much. Their emotional wiring tells them that vulnerability is dangerous, that getting close equals getting hurt. So when someone begins to matter, they retreat, not to reject that person, but to manage the anxiety that intimacy awakens. To them, distance feels like safety. But what they'll never say out loud is how lonely that safety feels. Their silence isn't empty. It's a test, not of you, but of safety. They're asking in their own quiet way. Will you still be here when I'm not perfect? When I need space? When I don't know how to say what I feel? They want to know if your steadiness can survive their storms. What avoidants truly long for is to be understood without interrogation, to be seen in their withdrawal and not shamed for it. They crave someone who can listen beyond words, who can sense that behind the calm tone and distant eyes is a heart that's terrified of being misunderstood. They're not trying to play games. They're trying to feel safe. And yet, the more someone tries to force closeness, the more unsafe it feels. They retreat further, not out of cruelty, but out of panic. The irony is painful. The more they need love, the more they resist it. But when they meet someone who can hold both truths, the need for closeness and the need for space, something in them begins to soften. They start to feel that maybe love doesn't have to be all or nothing. The hidden language of avoidance is subtle but powerful. It's in the way they linger a second longer before leaving. In the way they remember small details they pretend not to care about. In the way they reach out, then pull back, hoping you'll understand that both gestures mean the same thing. I want to be close, but I'm scared. If someone can translate that silence with compassion instead of frustration, they become unforgettable to the avoidant, because they've finally met someone who listens to what isn't being said. For an avoidant, love must feel like peace, not pursuit. They don't fall for grand gestures or declarations that demand commitment. They fall for calm energy, for people who know how to exist beside them without invading their quiet. They fall for someone who feels like still water, steady, patient, and safe. That's the kind of love an avoidant can finally trust. What they want, though they'll never say it, is someone who doesn't confuse patience with passivity. Someone who can stay emotionally available without pushing for progress. They don't want someone to fight their walls. They want someone who makes the walls unnecessary. A person who can stay grounded through their distance, who doesn't chase or panic when communication slows. Because when you don't chase them, they begin to chase their own comfort. They start asking themselves, why do I feel safe with this person? And that question begins to unravel everything they once believed about love. Avoidants are not incapable of connection. They're simply terrified of depending on it. But when they encounter someone who doesn't demand dependence, who allows love to flow at a natural rhythm, they start to relax. They begin to associate closeness with safety rather than suffocation. Their heart starts to recognize that love doesn't have to mean control, that vulnerability can coexist with freedom. This kind of relationship doesn't happen through force. It happens through emotional steadiness, through the quiet message that says, you don't have to perform here. You don't have to be perfect. I'll meet you where you are. That message is everything to an avoidant. It's what they've been waiting to hear their whole life, not in words, but in actions. When they feel that kind of acceptance, their guarded nature softens. The small things they used to avoid, eye contact, affection, honesty, start to slip through. They might still retreat from time to time, but they return faster because they know safety is waiting. Love begins to feel less like a threat and more like a refuge. And slowly, they begin to show the parts of themselves they've always hidden. The sensitive, loyal, deeply emotional self beneath all that composure. That's the version of them no one gets to see. The one they reserve for the person who doesn't make them prove their worth. That's what an avoidant really wants. Not perfection, not drama, just a connection that lets them breathe and belong at the same time. You can't always tell when an avoidant is falling in love. They don't announce it. They don't glow with obvious excitement. In fact, they might look more distant than ever. But inside, everything starts to shift. The emotions they've spent years containing begin to leak through the cracks of their composure. Their mind becomes restless, analyzing, questioning, not the other person, but themselves. Why do I care so much? Why can't I stop thinking about them? When an avoidant starts to fall in love, the experience feels both magnetic and terrifying. Connection becomes a threat to their autonomy. Their heart says stay, but their body says run. They start to overthink the smallest moments, a glance, a text, a pause in conversation, searching for signs of danger. The more they feel, the more their instincts tell them to protect themselves. But the more they pull away, the stronger the pullback becomes. What they really want, though they can't say it, is reassurance without control. They want to know that they can love someone without losing their sense of self, that they can reach out and still have the freedom to retreat when the feelings become too heavy. This push and pull isn't manipulation, it's survival. They're testing whether the connection can hold their fear without collapsing under it. Their love shows up in small, quiet ways. In the way they listen intently even when they say little. In how they remember your routines, your favorite songs, the things that make you smile. In the effort they make to stay even when every instinct tells them to flee. Falling in love for them isn't just emotional, it's revolutionary. It means dismantling the walls that have protected them their entire life. To be loved by an avoidant is to witness the slowest kind of surrender. Not dramatic, not loud, but deeply meaningful. When they let you in, it's not because they need you to complete them. but because they trust you enough not to destroy what they've built inside. They'll never say, "I'm scared of how much I feel," but you'll see it in the way they hesitate before touching your hand, in the quiet pauses before they speak, in the nervous laughter when they try to say something honest. That's their version of vulnerability, fragile, cautious, but real. And when you hold space for that, when you don't rush their process, when you don't take their fear personally, they begin to realize something powerful. Love doesn't have to take their freedom away. It can give it back. Trust, for an avoidant, is never a declaration. It's a quiet shift. You won't hear them say, "I trust you now." You'll feel it in the way they breathe differently around you, how their body softens, how the tension they carry, the constant readiness to protect themselves, slowly begins to fade. Trust, for them, isn't built through promises. It's built through consistency, through the repeated experience of not being heard when they expect to be. It happens subtly. They start answering messages faster. They let conversations go deeper. They stop rehearsing every word before they speak. There's a new calm in the way they look at you, like they're no longer scanning for danger. Like maybe, just maybe, this time is different. And yet, even in that trust, there's still fear. Because for an avoidant, trusting someone is the most dangerous thing they can do. It means surrendering control, the one thing that's always kept them safe. What they'll never say out loud is how much courage it takes to stay, how much energy it costs them to fight the instinct to run. When they open up, they're not doing it casually. They're risking emotional exposure on a level that feels almost unbearable. But they do it anyway, because something about your steadiness makes the risk feel worth it. Avoidants don't test people with words. They test them with silence. They watch what you do when they withdraw. Do you chase, demand, guilt, or panic? Or do you stay steady, offering quiet reassurance that you're still there, without trying to control them? That's when trust begins. They want to know that they can step back without losing everything, that your love doesn't depend on constant closeness, but on mutual respect. Because when love starts to feel like pressure, they disappear. But when it feels like choice, they stay. And when they finally trust you, it's not a small thing. You become the exception, the one who made safety feel like connection instead of control, the one who understood their silence, not as rejection, but as fear asking for patience. To earn an avoidant's trust is to witness transformation. It's seeing a heart built on self-protection slowly learn what it means to rest, to exhale, to belong without losing itself. And when that happens, even they are surprised, because it's the first time in their life that love feels like freedom, not a cage. An avoidant may never say, "I love you," the way you expect. For them, love doesn't come wrapped in constant affection or verbal reassurance. It shows up quietly, through effort, through presence, through the small things most people overlook. Because for them, showing up is vulnerability. And when they do, it means everything. You'll notice it in the subtle ways they start to include you in their world. They'll mention you in future plans, not dramatically, but naturally, as if you already belong there. They'll remember the tiny details you thought they'd forgotten. The way you take your coffee, the song you hum when you're anxious, the story that made you cry months ago. They'll start doing things that make your life easier. Fixing something, remembering appointments, anticipating your needs before you voice them. It's not about grand romantic gestures. It's about reliability, predictability, quiet acts of care that say, "I may not know how to express love perfectly, but I want you to feel safe with me." For the avoidant, this is intimacy, because what they fear isn't loving someone. It's losing themselves in that love. So when they begin to show up consistently, even in small ways, it's their version of saying, "You matter enough for me to stay." They won't say, "I miss you," but they'll check in at odd hours, asking practical questions that hide deeper meaning. They won't say, "I need you," but they'll start sharing personal stories, glimpses of the inner world they guard so carefully. Each of those moments is a confession disguised as conversation. When they care, you'll notice their tone softens. Their presence lingers longer. Their avoidance becomes less about fear and more about balance. They start to seek you, not out of dependency, but out of quiet desire for connection. Their love language is restraint. It's the way they let you in, slowly, carefully, without losing their shape. And if you're patient enough to notice it, if you can see love not as performance, but as effort, you'll realize something profound. Avoidants love deeply. They just love differently. They love through stability, through the promise of emotional calm. They love through trust that builds over time, through actions that whisper what words cannot carry. And when they do finally say, "I love you," you'll know it's not said lightly. It's said because they've battled every fear to mean it. When an avoidant finally feels safe, it doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds quietly, like light slowly filling a room that's been dark for too long. There's no announcement, no dramatic confession, just a soft, almost imperceptible shift. Their shoulders relax. Their laughter becomes unguarded. Their eyes hold yours for a little longer than before. And in those moments, you see it. They've stopped protecting themselves from you. Safety, to an avoidant, isn't built through passion or constant reassurance. It's built through calm consistency, the experience of not being punished for their fears. It's the steady realization that you won't weaponize their distance, that you'll meet their silences with patience instead of panic. When they see that your love isn't conditional on their emotional availability, something inside them begins to heal. This is when you witness the most tender version of them, the one they've hidden behind sarcasm, self-sufficiency, and control. They start to express affection more openly, not because they've changed, but because they finally feel safe enough to. They begin to initiate contact, share deeper parts of themselves, and even allow emotional dependence in small doses. They stop measuring love by how much freedom they might lose, and start recognizing it by how much peace they gain. For them, safety doesn't mean perfection. It means they can be imperfect without fear of abandonment. It means they can say, "I need space," and trust that you won't disappear. It means they can be vulnerable and still feel respected. And that's the deepest kind of love they know. Not one that overwhelms them, but one that holds them gently, without pressure or demand. You'll notice their love in quiet companionship, in the way they choose to stay, not because they have to, but because they want to. Their walls, once built for protection, now become doors that open and close with ease. They begin to believe something they never thought possible, that love doesn't have to be a battle for control. It can be an act of trust. And in that realization lies their greatest transformation. The avoidant who once ran from intimacy now protects it. They guard not their solitude, but the bond that made solitude no longer necessary. Because for the first time, love doesn't feel like a threat to their independence. It feels like the very thing that honors it. If you listen closely, not to their words, but to the silence between them, you'll hear it. The thing avoidants never say out loud. "I've always wanted love. I just never believed it could feel safe." They won't tell you how many times they've stood at the edge of closeness and turned away, not because they didn't care, but because they cared too much. They won't admit how many nights they've replayed conversations in their head, wondering if they pushed someone away for good. They won't say how exhausting it is to live behind walls that once protected them, but now keep them isolated. Deep down, every avoidant longs for the same thing we all do: to be understood without having to explain, to be accepted without having to perform, to be loved without having to disappear. But fear has been their compass for so long that even when they find peace, part of them still looks over their shoulder, waiting for it to end. What they really want is love that stays quiet, steady, real. The kind that doesn't demand constant closeness or melt under the weight of silence. The kind that doesn't take their hesitation personally, but sees it as the language of someone learning to trust again. They want to be with someone who doesn't need to fix their distance, just to stand at the edge of it and wait, patiently, until they come closer on their own. And when they do, When they finally allow someone in, that's not weakness. It's courage in its purest form. Because for an avoidant, vulnerability is a rebellion against everything they've ever believed about love. It's saying, I'm scared, but I'll stay. They may never say these words, but they'll show them in the way they look at you. That quiet gratitude in their eyes when you meet their fear with gentleness instead of force. In the way they start to share space with you, not as an escape, but as a choice. Avoidants don't need to be fixed. They need to be seen, truly seen, and trusted to come home to connection in their own time. Because when love stops chasing them and simply stands still, they stop running. That's what an avoidant really wants, but will never say out loud. To be loved not for who they pretend to be, but for who they are when they finally stop hiding. If you've ever loved someone like this, or if you see yourself in these words, share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to the channel, and let's keep learning how to love, gently, bravely, and without fear.